Hello and welcome back to Learn the Bible in a Year. Today we're going to be jumping into Genesis chapter 17 and 18, Matthew chapter 6 verses 25 through the end of the chapter, and then also Matthew chapter 7 verses 1 through 23. We're also going to be jumping into Proverbs chapter 1 and verses 8 through 19. Without further ado, let's jump into today's recap. So we are jumping into Genesis chapter 17, and Abram is 99 years old. This is 13 years after Ishmael was born. And God shows up and says it's time to make an official covenant. He changes Abram's name to Abraham, which means father of many. But this is not just a new name. It's a whole new identity that matches what God is about to do. And then God says that this covenant needs a sign, and that sign is to be circumcision. Every male after he is 8 days old will be circumcised. This is a permanent and visible covenant, one that you can't really fake. So I just want to take a second here to describe to you what ancient covenants actually looked like. So in the case of ancient covenants, this type of covenant would be called a vassal suzerain covenant. I know that's very fancy words and a little bit nerdy there, but the reason why I mention this is because in a vassal suzerain covenant, there is always one party or member which is more powerful, and then another party or member which is less powerful. So the suzerain is the powerful party, and the vassal is the weaker party. That will make sense here in a second. So I want to give you a modern day example of what a vassal suzerain covenant actually looks like. So let's say you are at the grocery store and you are intending to buy groceries. You go through the checkout line and you exchange money for your groceries. You give money to the checkout clerk, and the clerk will allow you to take the groceries, and then the clerk will give you a receipt signifying that you did in fact buy these groceries. So why is this important? In this example, the grocery store or the grocery store clerk, that person is the suzerain, the one who's more powerful. And then me buying the groceries would be the vassal. Now, because of this exchange, a receipt is provided for the vassal. That's me. That receipt's really important. If I bought those groceries and then somebody came up to me and said, "Hey, those groceries aren't yours," I would say, "Well, yes, it is. I have a receipt right here." So that's a very common transaction that we see all the time. It's similar in this vassal suzerain covenant that God makes with Abraham. So God says, "I'm going to multiply your family and I'm going to make a great nation out of you." And then that's God's part of the arrangement. And then Abraham's part of the arrangement is to follow God's rules. So that is this covenant agreement. And the sign of the covenant is circumcision, meaning God, who is the powerful one, can't go back on his promise because of this sign. This circumcision is like a receipt that the vassals get to have to show God, "Remember, you made this covenant with us, and you're going to make us a great nation." So there are actually tons of covenants that we'll see throughout the entire Bible, but this possibly is the most famous one. I know it's a little bit odd for us to see circumcision, sign of the covenant, what all that means, but hopefully this provided a little bit more clarity. All right, finishing up the recap in Genesis 17, God also changes Sarai's name to Sarah, and he drops a bombshell. She's going to have a son. Abraham literally falls down laughing. He's nearly 100 years old and she is 90. He's thinking this is medically impossible. He even suggests that God should just bless Ishmael and call it good. But God insists. Sarah will have a son and his name will be Isaac, which means he laughs. Is there irony in that name? You betcha. The kid's entire name is a callback to the moment of Abraham cracking up at God's promise. God says that he will bless Ishmael too, but the covenant continues through Isaac. That same day, Abraham circumcises himself at 99, which is a rough task, along with Ishmael and every male in his household. No delays, immediate obedience. I'm so glad that I did not live in Abraham's household back then. And then moving on to Genesis 18, three men show up while Abraham is sitting outside of his tent. He immediately goes into full hospitality mode. He's bowing, he's offering water to wash their feet, he's bringing out his best food. Sarah makes fresh bread, has a calf prepared, and he serves them curds and milk. This is ancient Middle Eastern hospitality at its finest. And then one of the visitors asks about Sarah by name, which is very interesting. Strangers shouldn't know her by name, but they say that they'll be back within a year, and when they come back, Sarah will have a son. Now, Sarah was eavesdropping on this conversation, and she laughs about it. But God calls her out on it through Abraham. She gets scared and lies, saying that she didn't laugh, and God simply says, "Yep, you did." Then the men look towards Sodom, and God decides to let Abraham in on what's about to happen. Total destruction of Sodom and Gomorrah because of how wicked they've become. Adam starts this incredible negotiation. He says, if there are 50 good people there, will you destroy 50 good people? And God agrees to spare the city for 50. But Abraham keeps pushing. What about 45? What about 40? He works all the way down to 10, and God agrees to every number. This is really a stunning picture of intercession and someone standing in the gap and pleading for mercy. We're going to have to wait to read more to see what happens to Sodom and Gomorrah. Now, moving on to Matthew chapter 6, we're reading 25 through 34. Jesus tackles this idea of anxiety head on. He says, stop stressing about food and clothes and basic needs. He says, look at the birds. They don't stockpile or worry, but God feeds them. And he says that we are worth more than many birds. But here's the thing about worrying. It literally accomplishes nothing. Can stressing add even an hour to your life? Well, Jesus, points out, no, stressing can't. He says that look at the wildflowers. They're more beautiful than Solomon's best outfits, and they're here today and gone tomorrow. If God is willing to put so much care into flowers, don't you think he will take care of us? And then Jesus says that the pagans, the people who don't know God, obsess over this type of stuff. And he acknowledges that God the Father knows that we need certain provisions, but not to be stressed out over it. Don't borrow tomorrow's problems today. Each day has enough struggles without worrying about tomorrow. Now, moving into Matthew chapter 7, and we're reading verses 1 through 23, Jesus warns against being judgmental. Whoever's standard you use to judge others, it will be used on you. It's like having a 2x4 sticking out of your own eye while you're trying to help somebody else with a splinter out of theirs. Jesus is saying to deal with your own issues first. Be wise about who you share valuable things with. Don't throw pearls to pigs. Discernment really does matter. Keep asking God for what you need. Keep seeking. Keep knocking. If human parents know how to give good gifts to their kids, how much more does God want to give good things to those who ask? And then comes in one of the more famous scriptures in all of the New Testament, the Golden Rule, which simply says, treat people the way that you want to be treated. And that sums up most of everything that Jesus just went over. He then goes on to say to watch out for false teachers who look good on the outside, but are totally destructive on the inside. And he says that we'll know these people by the fruit that they produce, the deeds that they have, the works that they do. Good trees produce good fruit, and bad trees produce bad fruit. And then Jesus drops a bomb. Not everyone calling him Lord will get into the kingdom. Some people will say that they prophesied or cast out demons or did miracles in his name, but his response will be, I never knew you. So this is really cementing the point we've been talking about the last couple of days. It's not about how impressive your ministry resume or your supernatural activity is. It's about actually knowing him and doing what the Father wants. This is a really important point. People back then and still today believe that our good works can save us. But let me not mince words with this. Our good works cannot save us. Only a relationship with Jesus can save us. That's the whole point of what Jesus is talking about here. All right, now jumping over to Proverbs chapter 1, and we're reading verses 8 through 19. This wisdom literature starts with a father talking to his son. Listen to what your parents teach you, it'll serve you well. And here's the setup: bad company shows up and makes crime sound appealing. Come with us. We'll ambush some innocent people, take their stuff, get rich quick. We'll split everything evenly. It's a lure of easy money, belonging to a crew, and the thrill of violence. I can think about gangs today operating in a very similar way. But the father says, well, don't do it. Don't even go near them. They're rushing headlong into evil and bloodshed. Then this great image. Spreading a net in plain sight where birds can see it is pointless. These criminals think that they're setting up traps for others, but they're actually destroying themselves. Chasing illegitimate gain costs you your life in the end. It's the principle that actions have consequence and that what goes around comes around. The sin destroys the sinner. That is always the case. Alrighty, so that's the end of the recap. Today's episode is being sponsored by Covenant Security Equipment. Covenant Security Equipment is a Christian company that partners with building contractors who build with safety in mind. Bullet-resistant windows, secure transaction systems, drive-through installations, and much more. Covenant Security Equipment delivers commercial-grade security solutions with a fast turnaround. To find out more, go to covenantsecurityequipment.com. Alrighty, let's jump into today's questions. If you don't have a copy of the Learn the Bible in a Year workbook, you can get the digital version of that totally free. You could also get the paperback version, which is what I tend to use. The link to both of those versions are in the show notes, so make sure you go and check that out. All right, question number 1 for today is from what we read in Genesis. God promised Abraham and Sarah a son at their old age. And here's the question: what impossible promise from God are you struggling to believe in, and how can He fulfill it? What a great question. I think we all have struggles like that. And question number 2 is from our reading in Matthew. Jesus says not to worry about tomorrow and not to judge others. Which of these commands is harder for you to obey, and why? I think for me, it's harder for me to not worry about tomorrow, but everybody's different. What about you? And question number 3 is from what we read in Proverbs. Wisdom warns against joining others who plan evil. And here's the question: what influences or relationships are trying to lead you away from wisdom's path? And then the final question, which is the same question every day: what is your main takeaway from today's reading? My main takeaway is from Jesus' words when he says, do not worry about tomorrow. Tomorrow will have enough worries of its own. For me personally, I'm a father, I'm a husband, I'm a business owner. I have a lot of things that I can worry about, and that's for sure. And I tend to be somebody who is kind of highly anxious, if I'm being honest. So these words of Jesus I really need to take to heart, not to worry about things, especially things outside of my control, and rely solely on Jesus. Alrighty, so that's the end of today's episode. I'm no longer going to be reading the fun facts at the end of each episode. I'll just leave those as little Easter eggs inside of the workbooks just for you, so I won't be reading those on air anymore. And I will see you all again tomorrow.